Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. We neither represent, promote, or demote any 12-step program or organization. We are merely souls on the path of recovery with the desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 29th Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. I'm Milan Starcic with my co-host Dustin J. Our topic today is step 4 to 6 in our 4-part series. Awesome. So Dustin, you want to read out step 4? We'll start with that. And then basically I've got some questions for that one, and I'm sure you do too, and we'll go on from here.
For sure. Sounds good, Milan. Thank you. Step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves.
So, first of all, would you like to describe what you think the purpose is of step 4?
Well, I mean, I guess I could describe it in two ways. When I did my steps for the first time and got into step 4, when we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. uh, I had this different opinion that, I was going to be, it was all the things that were done to me. It was all the things, the wrongs that were done to me, all the reasons that I had been using to justify my addiction and my use and my, acting out my character defects. Here was going to be the list of the reasons that justified my 20 years of chaos that I had lived in. And when I got into it, I did it two different ways. I've actually done a couple step 4s. I did one before I did I got into step 4 two times and then relapsed and went back out and had to come back in and do them again. And the first couple times I did them by the step working guide from the NA program. And then the third time I did them was doing them the columns, the different style, a little more simplified. And I found that the column style definitely worked better for me. It got me through there. And as I went through, the big eye opener for me really started happening in step 4. That's where I really punched in the face with the fact of these defects and how much of this was my fault, like my issues that were causing the chaos. It really peeled back that layer that I had, where I didn't really have anywhere to hide. I didn't have those excuses to keep leaning back on and lying on. And I've heard some of your other episodes recently where you've talked about it, and you've mentioned that you went into this thinking you're gonna have a big lineup of people waiting to come and apologize to you after you were done.
I already had like the turnstiles you see at the theaters. Like I was dividing up the rows of people.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I mean, I kind of had that
Single
same.
file line, no budding.
Yeah, mine was going to be organized from family to business people. There's going to be tons in each one of those lines,
I
and
thought they'd have a parade for me by the end of it.
exactly. Yeah, the real reality of it is at the end of it, I was left looking at the fact that 95 to 99% of the things that I had used to justify my addiction and my drug use and my bad behavior and everything that was going wrong in my life was actually boiled back to me, and a lot of the trauma and the traits of realizing that a lot of that was my fault. And then the other big eye opener that I had when I was doing mine is that I realized a lot of those problems and issues started, as young as I can remember. Like I can remember some of these things when I really started dissecting in step 4 and looking at the reasons and the traits and the defects and everything else. They were starting to be present when I was, as young as 3 and 4 years old. Like some of my earliest memories, I could, see some of that stuff starting, So yeah, it was a pretty big eye opener. How about you, Milan?
So I just, right off the last thing you were saying there, I've been doing a little bit of couples counseling with my wife. And one of the things, that very first exercise he gets us to do is to go back to our earliest childhood memories of the two best memories we have and the two worst memories we have. Because apparently, right down in those early ages are when our needs get established, right?
Mhm.
So for good or for bad, like things we don't need in our life or things, we do. And so, I feel like when you're saying that there was roots of those problems and defects down in your life, so for me, I always call this, the moral inventory that makes me fear less, you
Mhm.
know, but it takes, the spiritual principle that kind of goes along with this step 4 is courage. And it really does take courage to abandon the assumption that the world is causing all your problems and that just maybe you might have a part in this, you know? And for myself, whether it was the delusion of substance abuse or whether it was just a lack of tools, but for whatever reason, I spent most of my life not being able to understand my part of
Mhm.
in my part in my life, really.
Yeah.
Like this moral inventory is based upon resentments. That's where they start you out in all the 12-step programs that I've seen. It's based on resentments. Why is it based on resentments? Because those resentments lead us to acting in a defective behavior. That defective behavior is called shortcomings, right? Those shortcomings generally, I've yet to see one taken to the extreme of an addict that helps your life.
Mhm.
There's no point where I'm like, man, raging out on someone really did me good, you know,
Mhm.
or sitting in the corner feeling like, a simmering passive aggressiveness towards someone. Another great one, like, and so one of the things I like, and I think you and I read this together at one point in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions book, but how these character defects, like everybody has emotions. These are naturally serving us emotions, but in the same way that we take our addiction too far, we take our emotional reaction and our defects too far. Like anger's not a bad thing. Sadness is not a bad thing. They're neither good nor bad. They're emotions. But the level that we take them to and where they take us to is not serving our life anymore,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
And then for myself,
Mhm.
what I found out through my step 4 was that I was using them as excuses to go and use. Like they were simply like tools for me to go and use more.
Mhm.
Like I would be angrier at you than I should be. I would be sadder than I should be about events. I would have to celebrate every fucking thing out there. My anxiety towards the future that some of these defects provoked would like be my reason why I needed to chill the fuck out, which was like 5 days later,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and to a really embarrassing point. So one of the things that happens is that we write out resentment with about a person, right?
Mhm.
And then the next column is what's the next column there, Dustin J?
1 second
You know
here.
what? Let's just go through the columns.
Sure.
We've done. Because I think what, if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it like
So
uh
I've got so you got the name of the person,
yeah.
then you've
So
got the
then
cause,
yeah.
the
So we've got
how.
the cause of the resentment. So the
Mhm.
cause might be Dustin shit talks me to my friends. We're
Yeah.
gonna we're gonna ride through this example because Dustin shit talks me all the time to my friends. Okay,
Yeah.
so now the next column is
How it affects my.
yeah. So it now they in the books they have sort of groupings of different things that it can affect my, like in this circumstance I would say that it affects my self-esteem, you
Mhm.
know, and that would also affect my personal relations
Yeah.
because it would be my relationship with Dustin that gets affected. But not only that, is that if you shit talking me to my friends, it could also affect those.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect my financial security, but it could affect my emotional security.
Yeah,
in a respect. Okay,
yeah.
next column.
So my part and the defect tied to that part of it, basically.
Okay, so, my part in Dustin shit talking me to my friends could be that maybe I've never told Dustin how I feel about him talking to other people about me.
Hmm.
So that could be like, lack of action on my part. But it also could be that maybe I shit talk Dustin. Like even right
Hmm.
now, am I shit talking Dustin to the entire audience? You know?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and maybe Dustin's coping skill is revenge,
Hmm.
So or maybe I removed one of Dustin's needs in our interactions, and he now has a resentment to me about that. And so I have to look back through, like was I dishonest with Dustin? Is that why he's shit talking me? Did I treat Dustin in a way without compassion, or a lack of acceptance who Dustin is, and a big one that comes up really, I mean, if I think if you're honest, is really an overall lack of acceptance. Like if we had acceptance of everybody inside their being of who they are right now, most resentments would melt away.
Hmm.
And and then after we get the your part, we look at the fear involved with that. Like, what am I afraid of by Dustin shit talking me? Am I
Hmm.
afraid that I'm going to be lonely? Am I afraid that of what people are going to think about me? And then, going further and deeper onto that, is that fear of what I think people think about me? Is that really just me trying to control the universe? You
Hmm.
know, and then basically, uh, I'm sorry, I just I totally
That's okay.
but I feel that we go through and have this list, and so the way that was recommended to me was to start at the present day, go back to the childhood, and then come back up to the present day because you kind of be refreshed on that. And this can be a pretty lengthy or not lengthy list.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you don't know what you're carrying until you look at this in a few different ways.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, for my example, I just got through my first set of steps and my first step four list. Like I'm looking at it right now in front of me, and it's only one, two, three, four, five, six. I've only got about 12 or 13 things on there. And, once basically as soon as I finish my step 12, rather than get stagnant while I'm waiting to do some other service work, I wanted to kind of jump back into them because that was my first thought is, I could do a much deeper dive into these steps now. And that's where I am right now, is starting a second step four here to really try to get a lot. I think I got the first 12 ones that were at the forefront of my mind, but there's probably 250 other ones that I'm still carrying around in the background there that I want to try to work through. So,
And that rolls into the spiritual principle of courage
mhm.
to get the most out of this step. Like, first of all, I think that you have acquired, you know, either a little bit of serenity or at least smatterings of serenity in your life from that first 12 steps. Like I could see it in your face every time we talk,
Mhm.
and I think that personally that like you wanting to dive right back in because you want more out of your own program, it takes courage. It takes
Mhm.
courage to go back and say, hey, you know what, I might have missed something.
Well, and I see it a lot more on, where there's two big areas that it really pops up in my life. The first one being the way I interact with my family, particularly my wife and my kids. And the second one is the way I interact with my coworkers or my boss in my professional life. You know, we talked about those defects and my part in these problems. I used to cling to those things. I thought they were strong suits. Me being an asshole, me being a screamer, me being a control freak. In my sick mind, I actually thought those were serving me. I did. I thought they were what made me successful in work. I thought that they were, I was also addicted to work as much as I was addicted to drugs. And I climbed the ladder very fast in my job. By the time I was 27 years old, somehow I was able to hold my life together enough at that point still that I was doing a job most people don't get until they're in their mid to late 40s kind of thing. And, in my mind, I I accredited a lot of that to these defects. I thought that was what was making me successful. And then I also thought that, me being, I'll just call it as it is, me being an asshole to my wife and kids, I thought was me being a man. That's me controlling my household. That's me keeping my stuff in line. And, you know, I look at it now, and to be honest, I'm pretty ashamed of the way I used to act. I really am. I look at, the way I interacted with my kids, how I was molding them into being young adults of their own. The way I was treating my wife in particular. My wife stood by my side through so much bullshit. And then I look at the way I treated her in between the relapses and the runaways and everything else. And then same thing, I look at the way I interacted and even, talked to some of my bosses, my employers, my coworkers, and I'm ashamed of it. I'm quite embarrassed about it at this point. So, the little bit of uh I guess the clarity that I have now and the way that I can see the situations and just the self-awareness that I have from doing the program. um I'm starting to understand when I first walked in the rooms and I seen the calmness on the old timers and I seen that what they had that I wanted. I guess I'm starting to see little drips and drabs of that coming through in the way I handle my interactions in life now, and I want more of it. Yeah, you're bang on right. I want some more of that. So
I feel like my serenity comes to me in what I would call glimmers.
mhm.
It's like it's there. By the
Yeah,
time I appreciate it, it might be gone even.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. No, you're
Like by
right.
the time I fully acknowledge it, it could be completely gone. And so now, why do you think a thorough step four is required to move forward towards our spiritual experience?
Well, because I think for me, and the way I can put it the best is, I my story through the program has been a long one. Well, not a long one. I mean, I'm still fairly new. I've been coming to the program and the meetings for 3.5 years now. And I'm just coming up on 6 months sober time again here. I'll be coming up in the next month or so. I'll be taking my 6 months again. So I mean, obviously I haven't gotten it right the first time, but I mean, the fact that I keep coming back, I think that that's right, as hard as that is to do after a relapse. But without doing a proper step four, for me, seeing my part of these defects and my part of these situations that I was causing was huge. But as equally important was I was letting go of a lot of these resentments that I was carrying. And without being able to let go of these resentments, I just keep making more problems. Expectations lead to resentments, and resentments might as well be reservations. And, I mean, in order to work this thing thoroughly, you got to try to let go of all that stuff. You got to try to work through it. And if you're not doing your thorough step four, you're not identifying a lot of it. I mean, that's kind of the way I take it and see it, anyways, Milan.
I believe that awareness is the first step towards change.
Yeah.
And for me only, I can speak from, I had no awareness of my part.
Hmm.
Like I said, it's like I expected that there was going to be a lineup
Yeah.
of apologies coming to Milan for all these problems in my life. Like, you know, um, it's a psychological phenomenon. They call observer expectancy effect, right?
Hmm.
We think that all of our problems personally are caused by the outside world. But when we
Hmm.
look at someone else, we think that they are the source of all their problems.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
No, that's
like
right.
so it's like we see someone else in hardship, we blame them for their actions to have gotten into hardship. But for us, it's everything in the world but us that does
Hmm.
that. And that's that's kind of one of the big problems is that we have like a genetic natural thing to do that. And this program is something that helps us see, like, kind of almost step back for a moment and see us as someone else.
Hmm. It
You
gave me a
know,
lot of humility, my step four. I a lot of resentments and arrogance were changed into humility and, having to kind of face reality.
I feel that courage and humility are required for a thorough step forward.
Yeah,
Like,
I agree.
the humility to honestly admit those things, like our part, like to really stop and just be like, fuck, I'm not so fucking great. Or
Mhm.
in my case, for me, it's like, I don't even see reality as what it is right now.
No,
You know,
no,
like I had so many relationships that that I, like that I for decades, some of them for decades, I put the blame on someone else.
oh, 100%. I just when you said that it was bells going off in my head. Like that's exactly when I was, in my active addiction. I wasn't the issue. The rest of the world was the issue. I had to use drugs to cope with the rest of the world, you know. But in reality, this right here was what the issue was. This is why I was doing. Don't get me wrong, there was some trauma and stuff when I was a child that was out of my control, but it's how I've chosen to react to that trauma and to carry it and to be honest, I used it as an excuse for several years, and I mean that's
And,
yeah.
and that's the thing where, like, I really feel now as an adult at the age that I'm at, right?
Hmm.
It's laziness almost
Yeah,
that keeps someone in the position to say, "Oh, I had a fucked up childhood. I'm going to be an asshole my whole life."
yeah.
Like that is not a valid excuse to me at this point and at this age in my
Yeah.
life. Like, I think you can ride that excuse hard into like your early 20s. And then
Hmm.
it's like you're actually an adult and you have to start dealing with that shit. Or, like you can't remain the baby forever.
Like, I think especially once you start to reproduce your own little human beings that you're responsible for raising and turning into them, you can't be a kid trying to raise another kid. You know what I mean? Like maybe when they're little, depending on age and whatnot, but these young people that you're trying to turn out into respectable, young, productive of society human beings. You got to be an example as well. You can't if they don't have an example to learn. What's the chance of them not repeating your mistakes and doing that? It's yeah.
Well, like sometimes there's been aspects of parenthood that have been my greatest learning process.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
like one thing they say now that they never said when we were kids is that the adult male mind doesn't mature until 25.
Hmm.
So somebody who's having a kid in their like late teens or mid teens, even up to 25, you don't have a fighting chance on being the adult in the family because you're not even really a mature brain yet, you
Yeah,
know?
no, you're right.
And
My
but
last,
like I think it would almost be good to have like post-secondary school mandatory 12 steps.
yeah, I believe it. Like
When
my,
you're 25, every man who's 25 do a set of steps, and then let's start walking forward with what you think you know about yourself.
yeah, no, I agree. I had my last child when I was 30 years old, and there was a bit of a gap between him and the ones before. And to be quite honest with you, he's the only one that got a real proper dad, in my opinion. The other ones had a very immature dad that was not very good at being a dad sometimes. And that's a whole other topic we could get into there.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, we could have an episode one day, parenting before and
yeah,
after the steps,
yeah, yeah.
because I think it's definitely drastically changed for both of us. Okay, so are you feeling good that maybe we'll read step 5 now?
Sure thing, you betcha. So, step five, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs.
So now, with this step, obviously, we've now written out these lists and we have our part and we have our fears. So we've admitted them to ourselves.
Mhm.
But, step 5 is a reading them out loud. And that's kind of where you're admitting them to another person and to God. My first step 5 was not with my sponsor because I was still in the treatment center. So I had no sponsor. But it did form a bond with the person that I did it with.
Mhm.
It's a pretty in-depth thing that you're sharing with someone. You
Mhm.
may not even know that person as well as some of the people you think you've known in your life. You know, it has to be somebody that you trust not to be like sharing or gossiping from your
Mhm.
step 5 because that's that is, man, it's like a ultimate betrayal of the
Yeah.
actual process.
Yeah.
But I had a sponsor who said, "Oh, go to a priest and pay them $100 to do your step five." He didn't want to hear my step five four,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
having not had a great religious experience as a child, I was like, get fucked. Like, there's no, there's no way. I'm like the last person I'm ready. Like, I'm like, the religion is one of my fucking resentments here, dude. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I was like, that'd be like going and telling the person who's like fifth on my list, hey, mind if I read my step forward to you? You know, it,
Yeah.
it anyway, that was that we didn't proceed any further, me and that sponsor, to be
Yeah.
honest. And then I just picked up on a brand new set of steps with my second sponsor. But you know, I think there's something like, okay, what do you think the purpose of or step five is?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a couple different parts to it. You touched on the part about the sponsor, and I agree. I think that both as a sponsor and as a sponsee, I mean, as a sponsee, I can speak more on for sure. You got to have trust in that person that you're going to share that with. Like you said, you got to trust that that person's not going to run and talk about all these things to other people. I mean, this is going to be for me, anyways. This is some of the nitty gritty of my program is in step 4 or 5 and 6. You got to have trust in that person, and you've also got to have trust and confidence that in order to do this properly, that you're not going to feel judged when you do that. I've done 2 step 5s now. I've done one with 2 different sponsors, and I've been very fortunate in both situations. And you know, when I did them, it was relieving for me, especially with the first one. I can remember when I had this list of all this stuff, and they talked about, like I'd mentioned, I did the non-column way the first way, and it asks a lot of questions in there. You go through a quite a bit different process in that set of step 4, and when I got into sharing it with him, um, there was some really nasty, dark stuff in there. There was some really nasty, dark stuff that I was very ashamed of. The stuff that was the stuff I was going to take to the grave. That was going to be between me and whatever laid beyond when I closed my eyes the last time, kind of deal. And I'm very grateful that that man that I shared that stuff with at that time, he didn't flinch at all. It was, he, quite honestly, a lot of that stuff he had done or, had a one-off, one-eye to top me. Maybe he just did that to comfort me, whatever it was, it doesn't matter. But in that moment, um, you know, it created a level of trust. And I think that there's one part of writing it down in step 4 that, you acknowledge it to yourself, but I think that there's a real part of humility that you have to acknowledge it and make it real by telling it to another human being, and to your higher power. That you got to have the courage to do it. It creates that humility to do it. And it kind of, I don't know if I want to say it makes it real, but I guess to me that kind of made it real. Once it's out there, you're releasing it. You're not carrying it anymore. It's that stuff that you swore to yourself that you were never going to tell anybody else, and it sits inside, rots at your core, and by kind of puking it out, or for lack of better words, it gets it out of your soul. It gets it out of your insides. It's kind of the first step in starting to deal with a lot of it, I think, almost in a therapeutical way, I guess, Milan, would be kind of what I'm trying to get at there.
Yeah, like step five, man, there's really more to unpack on it than I think a lot of people realize on it.
Hmm.
Like first of all, we are like the ultimate self-centered, selfish being coming from
Hmm.
addiction, right? Packed inside that self-centeredness is pride. Okay. And one of the things that, I think a lot of addicts almost die of is terminal uniqueness.
Hmm.
Like, I'm so bad, I can't be helped. Which is like, I'm so bad is the same as I'm so good, just the
Yeah.
opposite direction. And a
Yeah.
lot of people don't realize that that's like that is a state of pride. But that, like that terminal uniqueness of I'm so bad, I'm beyond help, or nobody could understand the depths of my bad.
Hmm.
That's something that keeps a lot of people from even considering themselves savable.
Yeah.
You know, and to first of all to say it to themselves of like, well, this is like, this is the list of my problems and my part. It's funny that they call it the steps.
Yeah.
This is the step towards starting to heal.
Hmm.
Without that awareness, you can't heal. But part of that awareness is taking that, writing that down. Like there's something about a furtive thought in your brain, right? Like I
Hmm.
can be driving and I can think, gotta do this later, gotta drive there. I'm like this. Well, no, by the way, I'm an asshole, but turning right, turning left. Okay, yep, car here. And those things aren't with me every single second. But that underlining thought that I was an asshole for a second, that keeps popping up like
Hmm.
ping, pew, 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 pew. But why am I an asshole? But when you
Hmm.
write something down, there's some kind of like magic that happens of a solidification of thought. It's like I can stop thinking it, but then look back and I will think it every time I see it written down. And that's one of the things is that's why the step work isn't oral. And they recommend not to be typing it.
Hmm.
There's something about scrawling with your hand that brings an honesty, or hopefully an honest, hopefully you're doing it honestly. If you're not doing your steps honestly, then I suggest just throwing your pen away.
Yeah.
Like
It's just a waste.
like it's like the whole point is to finally get honest with ourselves. And the reason I think that step 5 is so important is because we have lived this duality where our thoughts and our words and our actions are two different things. Like what we think we are, we think we may say something honestly and then we're lying to get what we want.
Hmm.
We think we may be being nice, but we're hurting people with a whole ton of actions and just pretending that that's not happening.
Hmm.
I think one
Checking
of
your
the greatest
motives.
things about the spiritual experience that you're trying to attain with the steps is that we eliminate this conscious separation from our spirit that we're having. And that conscious separation occurs when we are living two separate lives. The real life that's occurring and the bullshit that we're existing in. And, you know, by seeing what we're doing, we can see where we're not unifying those, you
Hmm.
know? And we need to pull those into one thing. And the first step of that is to say it out loud to your higher power and this other person where we're not doing that.
Hmm.
You know, like we're not only just hiding away anymore and going, I'm a fucking liar. I'm a
Hmm.
fucking liar. I'm a dirtbag. I'm so angry. I can't, I'm not accepting anybody. But, oh, yeah, Dustin, I think you're awesome. Like,
Yeah.
it's like having that thought and then saying those words is like dishonest, intolerant, unaccepting. And, but to say, hey, man, I've been unaccepting here. I've been dishonest. I manipulate another person. I feel is that first step towards even bringing us to being able to change,
Hmm. Yeah.
you know?
Well,
And go ahead.
sorry, it's funny just as you're saying that, I still catch myself once in a while. It's certainly not as often as it used to be, but it still happens. And I'm grateful because I have an awareness now. And again, it'll usually happen within the relationships with my wife, my kids, or my work. And I'll start taking off on a tangent. and all of a sudden I got the little warning bells going off in my head. I'm doing something wrong with the way I'm acting, behaving, the way I'm acting out. There's a character defect coming. I've got to really, in those moments, check my motives, what I'm up to. I can still
Mm,
be very sneaky and undermining, and I can I still have character defects that are still there. It's just, a guy's a lot more aware of them now and can usually stop them a lot quicker. um you know Within the step five, uh it's almost, when you think about it, it's almost kind of a condensed version of one, two, and three. you know you got to have that surrender, trust in that higher power, and have that God. You look at it in the meetings, and I was the prime example, Milan. I Up until the last 6 months, I held so many reservations within this program. I was going to work it my way. It was going to be Dustin's program. I wasn't doing a 12 step. I was doing a 9 step because that's what's going to work. I know better than everybody else. There was the steps I was going to leave out because I didn't want to have a higher power, or I didn't want to have that. You'll still see it in the meetings quite often. There'll be members that just, they don't want to fully surrender. Maybe they haven't had that full gift of
mm,
desperation that they need just yet. I mean, like, some of them struggle with the God part. You see a lot of people struggle with that God or higher power part. You see a lot of them, like you said, that terminal uniqueness, where they're just too bad or too far gone, and they just, that's what's stuck in their head, and they can't get beyond that part of it. And I mean, for me, I think that this step five, you really gotta, I mean, again, that's why the program, I think, is designed and engineered the way it is the steps have to be done in order, because step five, for me anyways, is you really got to do that step one, two, and three in your head over and over as you go to really work it properly. I mean, for myself anyways, that's kind of the way I felt with it.
And I think also another thing that I've heard said a lot of times is that when you're doing your step five, right, and you
Hmm.
see that other person's face, that other person's like not ready to throw you in a garbage pile or
Yep.
execute you or
Yep.
like whatever sick perverse punishment you think like it's the only thing you're left worthy of.
Yep.
And that's a big that's a big self-acceptance piece right there in some
Hmm.
ways.
Yep.
Like I felt like, coming into this phase, I thought that, I was the dirtiest dirt. I had hurt too many people. I wasn't even like, what's the point of saving me
Hmm.
when there's really nothing worth saving anymore?
Hmm. No,
You
you're
know?
right.
And and I think it also it provides a very strong pivot point for us.
Hmm.
The more we see our part, our resentments, like, our fears underlying them, the more that we can identify where we got to go. Like, I'm not sure if I said it on this with you before here, but I was on this meeting a few weeks ago, and it was about emotion, the JFT, and this lady was talking about, and these signposts are the directions. I use like my emotion as the direction where I need to point my program. And I thought, what
Hmm.
an amazing thing, like, just instead of beating myself up about something, right? To be
Yeah.
able to use that direction. And if anything, the step four and the step five, it's like, first of all, we've had someone show us compassion by listening to our step five. We've had someone show us acceptance by by you know by not judging us in this process,
Hmm.
because essentially, I think a lot of, my sponsor said that your top three, defects are probably 95% of your problems in life.
Hmm.
And the more I think about that, I mean, you know me, Dr. Acceptance here. Like,
Yeah.
that's obviously one that, I mean, that I could apply to every single resentment that I have.
Hmm.
And so, I think that I've heard of a lot of people dropping out of the program after they've written their step four because they're scared to do their step five.
Yeah. For a lot of people, Milan, and I think about it as you're saying that, it's I think the step five really helps you build trust in the program.
Yep.
You think about it, if you were to sit down and do a step four and then sit down with a quote unquote normie or somebody from regular life that doesn't understand addiction and get into step four, you imagine the reaction of that person compared to, a sponsor that you trust that's going through the same program. They're just two different things. It's not apples to apples, it's apples and oranges. You know what I mean? Like I think it's a real strengthening part of this process and this program to really start to show, where people struggle to find the acceptance and the love in the program that they need to stick around and actually, quote unquote, wait for the miracle, don't leave before it happens kind of thing. This is kind of where it all starts happening, I think. And you're bang on because I know myself, like when I come into this, besides a very small handful of people, most people in my life had given up on me and wanted nothing else to do with me because of my actions and whatnot else. And and even the people that were still left hanging on in life with me, still going on this ride, they were anything but accepting of me in that. They were still there, don't get me wrong, and I'm extremely grateful, but they sure were not accepting of it. And this is for me, this is some of the first times of, really actually feeling accepted for who I am and understood for who I was, and that's a big thing. A person's got to maybe where you start getting a little bit of your self-worth back again afterwards too, possibly. So
They say it's a program of action.
yeah.
And my experience has been that growth is uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings are designed to avoid discomfort. Like
Mm-hmm.
a burner's hot, ow, that burns, you pull your hand away. Oh, it's
Yeah.
cold outside, you either put more clothes on or don't go out.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I think holds a lot of people back of going through the step work. The reason that this is such an integral part in moving forward with the steps is, what lies after this is the amends with a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
people, right? Well, if you can't talk about your shit with one person, there's a really good, and not
Mm-hmm.
only that is one person who's not even on your defects list, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be pretty hard for you to go out and actually make the amends to the people who you actually wronged.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of like introductory public speaking about your shitty parts. Like really, but a necessary step,
Yeah.
like and I think that that's part of the necessity of it is that, okay, here we go. Now we've identified these things and we have to learn how to be uncomfortable in order to grow.
Mm-hmm.
This is a step of uncomfortability. Nobody's like, can't wait to read my step four to someone. I have not met a person yet who's like, man, I'm so excited to go say the worst things about my life. There was a guy in my treatment center. I swear to God, I thought he was going to pass out.
Yeah.
Like he was like green and gray, and he's like sweating, and he's like, I gotta go to my. And I was like, he was like the guy right before me, and I'm like, what is this? Like they chain you to the wall, bullwhip you or something? Like I was like, what the fuck? And then he came out and he was like, oh my God. And I think he was catastrophizing it, obviously.
Yeah.
I think he part of him was throwing a pity party, but
Yeah.
that it was completely crazy. So with step five, a lot of sources associate the spiritual principle of integrity with it. And integrity would be defined as the quality or state of being complete or undivided soundness. And I think that that wraps back into what I was saying about us no longer having this divided, intention and expression in our life. You know, what do you feel about that, Dustin?
Um, yeah, I think you know, it definitely loops around to, unity in that matter. It's just again building on that trust part. It's helping you conform. I guess for me, again, it stripped away another layer of that terminal uniqueness. I mean, I think it just kind of took down another defense layer that I had. And it made me buy into this program that much more, I guess. I don't really know how to put it into words. It just
Yeah.
strengthened my thought into the program, into the process. With each one of these steps as I progressed, and I'm not gonna lie, like basically 4 through 8 were really, those were the tough ones. Those were the ones that, I didn't look forward to. But when I was done them, I was relieved as I went through each one of them. And then you slowly feel that gain. And I think that's why, like I mentioned, as soon as I was done my first set of steps, I was ready to dive back in and do some more. I wasn't afraid anymore. It just strengthened that trust in the program. The rewards were coming and I kind of wanted more. So
I I had a real profound pink cloud moment in my step five.
yeah.
My step five was, I would say, one of the greatest internal changes in my life in this program for sure, where it helped me shed so much guilt and shame that I had been carrying for so long. Like I can say that the 36 hours after doing my step five with my support worker there at the treatment center was my first guilt free 36 hours in my whole life, my whole conscious life. I was
Hmm.
like crying with joy at the relief of that feeling gone. I was like, boom, if the program ends here, I'm great.
Yeah.
You know, which I had that feeling also with surrender. I must say,
Hmm.
like, if the program ends here and I'm just not thinking about substance for the rest of my life, man, it sure felt good to not be thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like I could win that fight sometimes, but the fight wasn't over, and like the the joy, like it wasn't just serenity I felt from my
Hmm.
step five. It was an absolute blissful joy of the absence of that guilt and shame. And
Hmm.
like my recommendation for anybody out there is, people are like, well, how far do I go? And it's like, good saying, Brandy comes on there with Andrew, and that is, how free do you want to be?
Hmm.
Like, how free do you want to be? How far you go is going to denote how much freedom you receive from that step. So,
Yeah.
they don't call it a searching and fearless moral inventory. Like, they're not like a kind of all right, look at the surface moral inventory. Like,
Yeah.
like they're absolutely not.
Yeah.
So I guess let's go on to step six. You want to read it up for us there, Dustin?
Sure. So step 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character.
So in the 12 by 12, the very first sentence about this is a step that separates the men from the boys. And for me, my experience with it in treatment was well, it was a really positive experience actually. But okay, so I want you to start, Dustin. What do you think the purpose is of step six?
Well, I mean, through step 4, for myself anyway, step 4 is kind of the first time that I really had my eyes opened as to what my defects were and how they were playing a part into my role of
Mm,
my life, and how all these 4, 5, and 6, you're really kind of, for me anyways, I was kind of rattled to the core. All these things I had hung on to, like, I mean, I could tell you what, Milan, I used to have a sob story in my head, especially with that would come out when I was, pardon my language, fucked up. I would sit there, and when I was on one of my using binges, I would cry this story to the few people that would listen. I would justify my own shit with that story. And um after doing a step 4, that story had lost all its validity. Like, I stripped it away. I had to face the truth for the first time in a lot of ways, and all I was left was seeing my defects, the parts that I had caused in it. I didn't have that foundation to stand on that was justifying my addiction anymore, and so all I was really left with was this list of defects. And I think that step six is probably pretty crucial, because I mean, if you bow out at that point, now you've stripped away your story and your bullshit justification, and all you're left with is the defects. I mean, that's a scary thought, to leave and walk away in that state. I mean, I don't know how that would work, and I certainly hope nobody ever tries to do that, because I mean, when once you've identified them, you got to get rid of them. I mean, well, not get rid of them, but try to start working on them. You know what I mean? You're never going to get it perfect. It's a program of practice, not perfection, right? You hear that all the time. And now that you've seen them, in order to continually grow and watch this program work, and start to get that serenity in your life and whatnot, you got to, like you say, this is a program of work. You're going to get out of it what you put into it. And you know after seeing all these parts, like I said, I had clung to these reasons for years. They were what justified my life and motivated me and what the direction I was going. And I was pretty rattled afterwards, to be quite honest with you. I really was. And when I was left looking in the mirror and realizing that, I had so much wreckage in my wake, and that it was actually caused by me and not these other people and this and that, the first thing I wanted to do is, especially for the people that were still in my life, was get rid of these defects. It was kind of my way of starting to want to make amends towards them, which is obviously what we work up to later on in there. So I mean, it's no, I as soon as I seen them, I wanted to start working on them. And again, that's part of that trust in a higher power. People get so hung up on that God word, and I mean, each to their own what that means to them. But yeah, that it's I had to have a lot of faith in that higher power when I got into this step, because I knew that I wasn't going to do it on my own, and I knew that my own will wasn't going to work for me to do this. So yeah, no, it was definitely, once I was aware of them, I wanted to start working on either arresting them or changing them, or whatever it was that was possible that was going to come out of working this step.
So, the way that I perceived this step in treatment versus the way I perceived it in my last set of steps with my sponsor was fairly different. Using like the step working guide, or a version of that in the treatment center, it was a really different way. But gosh, I almost want to go grab my book right over there. Just wait one sec, hold on.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So how it kind of boiled down with my defects, right, was in step six. The first thing you do is they try to get you to define the defect on your own,
Hmm.
which if you're not correctly identifying it by now, how you working on it?
Yeah.
Truthfully, right? So, like, say I'm going to go through intolerance for myself, right? Intolerance, the state of dissatisfaction of a person or life event as they are instead of acceptance. Now, now the next question is like, how does this defect affect you and others, right? So my response to that was intolerance affects me and others by stopping acceptance and living presently, breaking surrender in my will, keep happiness and love down in my life, stops compassion, creates delusions of false reality, not allowing others their right to be who they are, making judgment of others seem okay when it's not, keeps self-loathing and low self-esteem rolling, which in turn keeps me from loving me, from not accepting others' faults, and allowing you to become you with confidence. Now, B, what does it bring into my life? It brings resentment, self loathing, stress, anxiety, anger, guilt, disappointment, unhappiness, and discontent, fear of inadequacy, happiness, and peace. That's what it's keeping. Number C, what would life be like if I could get rid of this defect? Now, this is where I felt like it was like the vision board of the steps, right? You know, I would be more loving and understanding, compassionate, happier, with so much less resentment, guilt, and shame. Number two, I would have honesty, integrity, open mindedness, willingness, love, and surrender. And, I had a pretty large list of defects. So there was a lot. Like my step six, like that, was 60 pages.
Mhm.
And but it was at that point one of the greatest. It was like the turning point in the steps for me.
Mhm.
Step six to me is like the turning point where it's like, okay, now you've seen your shit. Jump out of your fucking pity party about what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
And now we have to start changing it. The reason that that step, the 12 traditions and 12 or 12 steps and 12 traditions book says this is the step that separates the boys from the men is because we want to hang on to a lot of our defects. There's a lot of them that, like, look at how you were saying, how those defects served you in your job, like how you felt that those are your strengths. Well, this step, you want to repeat step six for us, Dustin?
Yeah. So we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character.
Exactly. It doesn't say we remove them.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that we are entirely able to have God remove them. But the spiritual principle assigned, with this step is willingness. And we have to be willing, even just a smattering, to start losing these defects. Because if we don't, as our addicts, that little part we hang on to is that part that's going to keep us sick,
Hmm.
you know? And if we say, I'll never be able to change that, we have shut the door on our growth right there.
Yeah.
So this step has a great importance, and like it has a much it's a much harder step than a lot of people give it credit for,
Hmm.
because like on this step you have to say that I am willing to throw out all my old shit in order to move forward with my new shit.
Yeah.
And that is a lot of work, a lot of uncomfortability, and a lot of admission that what we were doing wasn't right.
Well, and you think about it, step six isn't, I don't want to say it's not an action step, but when you look at it, step four and five, you're you're taking the action of creating these lists. You're putting pen to paper. And I mean you are in step six too, but in step four, you're creating this big thing. You're physically putting it down. You're doing this. And then same thing with, step five. You're sitting there and you're speaking to your sponsor about it. I mean, you're talking to your sponsor about all the steps, but I mean, they're more of an action step in four or five. And whereas in step six you're becoming entirely ready. It's a lot more of an internal step in that way too. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
And
You
I
know
think that that's hard for people to visualize.
it is, yeah. It's not something that's so easy to just do and make happen, in a lot of ways. And I think that again is where, and I speak from this from experience, having to hang up about the God part of the program can really hinder you on some of this stuff. If you get too caught up in your own head about that kind of thing, you can really slow the progression of all this down, right? So
I think it's the word entirely,
yeah. Yeah.
not kinda, not little bits,
Yeah.
like, but like, you know, are you really ready to never tell a lie again?
Hmm.
Are you really ready to accept everybody you meet around you for who they are at that moment for the rest of your life?
Hmm.
You know, that
Yeah.
that's some pretty extreme changes.
Hmm. Yeah.
But are you ready for that even?
Yeah.
Like, are you ready for the consequences of being an entirely different person and the life that'll bring?
Hmm.
Because
No.
that's jumping off a big cliff.
Yeah. And I guess for myself, I think that I don't know that I've got the entirety part of it done because I'm not gonna lie, I still day to day meet people I don't care for. I'm not gonna lie, But the thing is now is that when I have those interactions and those parts of my day come up, it's like it's like the record scratches in my head and I'm aware that it's happening. I've got that awareness now, and I can sit there and say to myself, I don't have to love this guy. I don't really have to have anything to do with him, but I can accept him for who he is and the part that he's going to briefly play in my life. And I don't
Mm,
have to take this with me for the rest of my day and have a
mm.
fucked up day because this guy rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, it's really.
You don't have to like what you accept, is what I
Exactly.
believe,
That's
you
that
know?
that's and that's a good way to look at it, Milan. And I think that's where, again, some people get too caught up in their own head and start getting going. I mean, I'm a high anxiety person, and I can turn a mountain out of a molehill like very quickly. So I mean, that's just a lot of these steps is for me has just been the awareness to see the things happening and be able to arrest it before it turns into that mountain kind of deal all the way through.
Nice. And let's see. So, how do you see the necessity of a thorough step six required to move forward towards our spiritual experience? Like if you don't do a thorough step six, how is that going to arrest your development towards your spiritual experience?
Well, I mean, there's two parts of it for me. The thorough parts of it is, entirely ready to have a God, so that's the first part, again, and trusting that God, higher power, spiritual, whatever you want to call it. And the second part of it, remove all these defects of character. Um, if you can't buy into both halves of it, for me, you don't have much chance at making this program work. Like, because I mean, again, the second you start trying to do it, rather than allow the God or the spirituality or whatever it is in your life, essentially you're taking your will back and you're trying to do it again, which we
Boom.
all know that that does not work. And
Hmm.
two, um, we have to let go of these character defects because I mean, these character defects are a big contributing factor to the problem that was going on. My way was not working. So, I have to be able to let go of those things and, continually try to improve on them. And I mean, that's where, the further you get into them now and whatnot, I hear a lot of people talk in the meetings about, being good when nobody's looking, doing good things
Yep.
for the right
See who
reason.
you are when no one's around.
Exactly. Doing the right things for the right reason. I mean, I'm sure Jim wouldn't mind me mention this. He shared a story about, purchasing socks for a homeless shelter around Christmas time and, doing this wonderful, wonderful thing for people and, and volunteering his time, but really having to check his motives of why he was doing those things. Was he
Mhm.
doing them just to want to be a good person? Or was he doing them because he wanted the praise and the accolades of being a good person? And that example
Mm.
really sticks in my mind. That's because, like, I'll be honest with you, I still catch myself doing it. I love to get on and tell people what a good guy I am at times. You know what I mean? Like, let's be honest. I mean, that's a defect, and I mean, it's one that I'm still working on. And I find that when I'm, you know, I used to be this asshole. And I mean, I still can be. I'm not going to say I'm perfect, but I was the jerk off that threw a cup out the window driving down the highway in a beautiful area because I was just a miserable piece of shit. So why not everything else around me be that way? And now, when I'm in that pickup driving 12 hours by myself, by the time I get up to work, I have a pile of garbage on the passenger seat of my truck that I put in a bag and I bring in because to me, that's just kind of the small things throughout my day that are trying to turn me into a better person and try to make the people and things around me a little bit better, like one small coffee cup at a time, if that makes sense, Milan. And that's the kind of stuff to me that when I'm alone and nobody else can see, nobody else knows but me. And that's how
Well,
I know it's
our
working.
whole audience knows now.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. I swear that's not my Tim Hortons cup on the side of the Alaska Highway. You know what I mean? That's but
Not
that's the
unless it's
stuff.
7 months old.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. And that's kind of what it is, Milan. It's that stuff right there. It's my defects today are a coffee cup out the window. If I go back to the way I was, my defects are taking my family's mortgage money and taking them to my dealer.
Mhm.
Like it's got to be that continual progression because as soon as I stop, I will go backwards. That's just the way it is.
Mm.
And as soon as I stop practicing the principles of this program and these steps, I'm going to be right back where I was in a very short period of time. I've tried it. I've had over a year clean time partially working this program without a proper surrender. And I veered away, and within 3 months, guess where I was? I was fucked up again. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
I will say the grateful part of it is, and you hear it said in the meetings, is that you don't lose what you've learned, which is a great part of it. So coming back, you can kind of pick up where you left off. But yeah, I mean, there's abstinence does not work in this program. And I mean, I think that this step 6, entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. One of my defects of character is laziness and, I mean, complacency. I mean, it is.
I'm trying to make this a year of no procrastination.
Yeah.
Like honestly, it's one of my defects that I just don't want in my life. And I'm not a big procrastinator,
Yeah.
but the problem is when you're a small procrastinator, every procrastination drives you freaking crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I like, I think it was Scotty N was on here, and he said, learning the program ruined using for me.
Hmm.
And, you know, like since wholeheartedly being in the program, I haven't relapsed, which, you know what, I'm not using that as a comparison to someone else.
Yeah.
But what I am saying is that it's like with the tools I've learned in this program, I just can't even see, like, if I ever did relapse, all I would be thinking is about this program and how I'm not living it, you know?
Well, and I can back that up, Milan. I can say personally that when I started living truly in all the principles of this program and doing a full surrender and letting go of all the reservations, I have not relapsed since. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty simple. Like it really, nor have I had the desire to relapse since. It was when I started
Mhm.
trying to live in my own self-will or hold on to those reservations or deviate away from the program and the way it's structured. That's when I relapsed. It's pretty
See, like,
simple.
I tell people, like, okay, now with sponsoring in this podcast, maybe it's 2.5 hours a day for me, maybe three some days. But,
Mhm.
like on the average day, what is it? Maybe an hour and a half a day for you to stay clean,
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
run
by
your
the time I do
program?
my one online meeting a day at minimum,
Mm,
and then maybe 15 minutes of step work in the morning and evening tied in with a little bit of reading and prayer. Yeah, an
mm.
hour and a half to 2 hours most at the max. And I
Pretty
enjoy it
fair
now.
trade
That's
to have your life filled with more love, joy, and serenity, and your family back,
yeah, yeah.
like, I mean, I don't know, man. I spend, I've spent more than that time on social media on a day and gotten nothing but angst out of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I just I think back into the early days when I was first coming to these meetings, and I remember I was the guy that asked my sponsor at the time, how long do I got to do this for? And the first time he responded to me, you got to do it until you don't want to do it or
Mm.
maybe I said that wrong, but basically what he meant was,
No, you
you
got to
know,
do it till you want to do it.
exactly,
I
you
believe
only
it's like,
have to do it until you want to do it. And I mean, I
yeah.
I remember like I'm at that point now. I look forward to this. This is my
Oh
time.
man,
This is
our
me time.
sessions together, like not
Yeah,
just this, but
yeah,
our other ones, it's something I look forward to,
I enjoy it.
and that the conversations and the problem solving,
Hmm.
like that's one of the things that I think is kind of the one of the unique gifts of sponsorship,
Hmm.
is that we talk about things in my life and in your life,
Hmm.
and we both care enough about each other that we try to problem solve together.
One addict helping another. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
but
nobody understands an addict besides an addict. Like, that's where I tried
mm,
for years doing outside treatments, Alberta Health Services, working with some wonderful people. But I remember I had one lady, and I'll never forget her because she did help me a lot with mental health issues. But she was an addictions therapist through Alberta Health, and she was a wonderful lady. But she'd never touched a drug a day in her life. And no matter whether it was in my head or whether it was reality, I always felt like I was being judged when I got into the nitty gritty with her, because I mean, she was this really
because they
wonderful,
don't
good woman.
understand those bad
No,
choices.
and nobody can, right? Unless you've been there, you just can't. So, I mean,
Like there's just a point where,
yeah,
like, my one of the counselors, or both of the counselors would say this, but the one that I went was saw the most in the treatment center, she would say, like, you and your addiction is not you now.
yeah,
Like you and your disease is not you now, because there's just choices that get made in active using that, like, I truly believe are beyond your actual, like, your perception of reality, first of all, becomes so skewed, and your desire to continue using becomes so strong that you just don't have the choice of making a good choice,
Yeah. No, that's
because
right.
you will choose to use, and whatever it takes to get to that using is merely just a step in the way. It's not
Mhm.
thought about others, it's not thought about consequences, it's just thought about access.
Yeah. Well, it's that 10,000 trips I can remember in my 20 some year addiction, driving to my dealer's house to pick up that first one, arguing with myself that I shouldn't be doing this and that, knowing that it was wrong, but not being able to stop, you know?
I would have that argument so bad that I often turned in without signaling from the highway.
Mhm.
Because I was like, I'm not doing it, I'm not doing it, I'm not doing it. Oh fuck, I'm doing it. And I would
Yeah.
turn. And the car
Yeah.
behind me would like honk its horn because I hadn't signaled.
Yeah. Using against your will. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
Man, this has
absolutely.
been a great one. So I love our breakfast recovery. I love you, Dustin. I'm
Yeah, I
grateful.
love you too, Milan. No, I
Anything you want to
appreciate
say to
this.
the people before we sign off?
No, just we just keep on. Biggest thing for me, and it's still fresh for me right now, is the even if you do have a relapse and a stumble, don't have too much shame to just keep coming back because I was so close to not coming back this last time, and I'm so grateful now just having finished a Christmas season and having come back that last time. It was yeah, that's the
Maybe
biggest
just
takeaway.
take a minute and tell everybody about your first Christmas straight with your family.
I'm sure. Yeah, this Christmas, I had a quote unquote normal Christmas for the first time in my family's life. Like, I mean,
How many
since my
years?
wife,
How old? What's your oldest kid?
my oldest daughter just turned 20 on
Okay.
on December
So in
28th.
20 years, folks.
Yeah, we had our first, we have our, we, I have my first grandchild who's a year and a half old, which is still weird for me to say, but I will say it. And you know what? I had the most wonderful Christmas holiday season this year with that little girl and their mom and my wife and just everybody. And it is, yeah, I had a normal Christmas for the first time, and it's because of this program. And I mean, that is, I could have cared less if I had one gift under the tree. Just the fact of the experience that we had, and it is 100% to do with this program and finally doing a proper surrender and letting go of those reservations. So,
That gives me a smile on my face and goosebumps on my arm, brother. I'm infinitely proud of you, man. And I look forward to next week's episode together here.
you betcha.
So
Yeah,
Dustin and I are going to keep continuing everybody along this till we finish the steps, and then we got more adventures for you after. Tune in next episode for more recovery fun. See you later, everybody. Love you.
love you too, Mom.
Please help us help others. If you've liked what you've seen here today, please subscribe and share this podcast and help us get to 100 followers. We're looking for interaction with our audience. So please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail.com or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We'd love to hear from you.